Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth George, Chief Membership Officer with the American Guild of Organists. And I'm so glad you could join us tonight for what I think is going to be a really interesting conversation. And we want you to be part of the conversation. Using chapter operating procedures to avoid conflict and support accountability. I know that's something you all deal with. So we really want you to contribute to this conversation. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. This is being recorded, and probably within the next 48 hours, you will get a copy sent to you. And I'm so delighted to have with me tonight our counselor for membership, Sue Mitchell-Wallace, and our Southeast Regional Ambassador, Kristen Lind, and as well, the Secretary of the New Hampshire chapter, Philip Becker. So without further ado, Sue, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and welcome to my colleagues, and hello to everybody who's joining us tonight. When I was in Kristen's shoes and as counselor for membership, my best go-to material for helping chapters is the board team handbook. It has so many wonderful pointers and wise advice. One of the reasons that I've enjoyed using it so much is because it it allows chapter officers who may have different communication styles to come together and to formulate a policy that works for everybody. And it sets down things that are very clear so that everybody has a calendar, a procedure to follow. It prevents confusion between board members. It is consistent from year to year and month to month. It also seems to tap down negative comments and criticism, and it gives a clear definition. Now, what more could you want if you're going to come together and serve your musical community than to have a wonderful roadmap? And board policies are not bylaws. Bylaws are like if you're going to take a flight on an airplane, those are the rules that the airline has. But board policy are the things that you and your chapter are agreeing upon as you take a trip together through a program year of AGO. So it's a great time saver, and it helps to bring consensus in case there might not be consensus. And it's a great way to build from year to year because you can change your policies if need be, and you can keep the policies that work so well for you and be creative as you move into new areas and new projects with your chapter.
Thank you, Sue. I couldn't agree more. It's practical. You know, I remember when I used this book about 20 years ago, and it was a spiral bound book. It wasn't even anything you could download as a PDF. But I think it's one of the most practical, useful resources if you are serving on a board, working with volunteers. So, Kristen, you want to share a little bit of experiences with what you encountered with the Memphis chapter?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so pleased to be here with you as the Southeast Regional Ambassador. I'm speaking from experience, though, as a Memphis chapter member. The Memphis chapter has a really wonderful scholarship program, and the people who set this up did such a great job at outlining policies for it, which is what we're really talking about, and delineating versus bylaws. So they set up a full page document. They call it guidelines, but essentially for our purposes tonight, we're talking about it as policies. So for instance, very practically speaking, they explained how the scholarship would be funded, how money could be taken in, They gave examples of how the amount could be determined. So there's some play in the policy that can be tailored due to whatever the circumstance is per year. It gives a timeline of the process, meaning when the chapter or the chapter committee, actually the scholarship committee, can start advertising and sending out information about the scholarships. It it lists the specific deadline for applications of the scholarship. This is for high school seniors who are going on to college, who are looking for some scholarship monies to support them. It gives the full description of the application process, the audition requirements, how the audition is evaluated, when the scholarship will be awarded. I mean, even as specific as it'll be awarded at the last chapter meeting. And then very smartly, it also explains how or what happens to the money if the scholarship is not used, if the student decides not to pursue music in college after all. So it provides a really comprehensive set of guidelines or policies to help manage the whole process. And it doesn't allow, for anyone to go rogue, or to raid the scholarship money fund or anything like that, or it doesn't allow the committee to just single-handedly one person take over and decide who the scholarship will be awarded to. It keeps it on an even playing field and just provides great clarity and protection for the committee, for the students who are applying, and for the chapter itself.
It's so true. It avoids confusion and not a lot of what ifs, because those what ifs have already been clarified very, very clearly in the procedures, the policies that were created. And it sounds like you really took a lot of time and thought to make sure that you addressed every single aspect of this scholarship program, so that there wouldn't be someone saying, well, wait a second, let me go back to our notes, because I can't remember what we said about how much money we would award them. Does anybody remember that? Or that, they can't find their minutes from the meeting that might have taken place a year and a half ago. So I applaud what you did. I really do. It really does avoid confusion, and setting a limit on expenditures, I think, is an excellent policy, whether it's for scholarships or whatever expenditures. I know a lot of chapters have a limit that the treasurer can use, and if he or she goes above that, then they need to bring what the purchase is for to the board, so that the board can vote on it and say, yes, we want to go ahead with this, or no, I think that we need to, or talk about, deliberate a little bit. But in any event, I'm very, very glad that it's been successful for you. Philip, you had an interesting situation a couple of years ago as a member of the New Hampshire chapter. Would you like to tell everybody about that? You just need to unmute yourself.
Here we go.
You got it.
The problem is when you're trying to nominate people, how do you determine their commitment to the goals and the objectives of the chapter? And this happened about 2 or 3 years ago. We had what we thought was a good nominee for dean. He was associated with a music school and a big congregation next to the music school, and he ran a good choral program there. And so he was a good leader. And we asked him if he would run for dean. He said, okay. Well, we elected him, and then he didn't show up for anything. So that was a painful sort of a process, because we tried to get a hold of him, and after a long process of registered mail and everything else, we finally determined that he was not committed to the job. So I guess if there was a failing, it was our failure to calibrate his commitment to the job when we nominated him. I think the lesson there is you nominate people with a proven track record. And we don't have a lot of them, but we've got some good ones.
Good
Uh,
point, good point. What you also did, which I thought was so important, is your chapter documented the emails, the phone calls, when you tried to reach this person and they were unresponsive. So that when you finally sent that registered letter and said, if we don't hear from you by X amount of days, you will be removed from the board, which is what you ended up having to do because you never did hear from him, did you?
That's right. We said, if you don't respond, we're gonna come over to your church. We didn't have to do that, but it was a matter of fairness to him, because there could have been miscommunications, he could have been sick, all that stuff. And it's a matter of fairness to the board and the members, that
Yeah.
we're trying to follow through on the election and the nomination process. So
They're
it
there to serve your members, absolutely.
was kind of painful, but we got it done. We have an excellent dean now, you know her well, Susan Foray. And I will praise her later if the opportunity comes up.
Well, I've certainly been dealing, Chris and I have been helping some chapters who've been having problems with leadership that's just missing. And that might have been so vital and active a year ago, but may have family situations, may have health issues, may have taken a new job that is just taking so much of their time. And they feel guilty saying, I'm so sorry, I can't do this. But then the chapter's kind of in limbo because they're not hearing from this person and it's more detrimental to the chapter. So there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with saying, in my heart, I want to do this, but I know that I just don't have the time to do it. And be honest with your peers, and at least then that gives your board the opportunity to say, okay, we understand. We can either appoint someone on a temporary basis and have a discussion, which is what we just did, Sue.
I just wanted to say that by having policies that are already created when you are asking people to run for an office, it's so easy to share these policies with them, or to even have a social event and bring prospective candidates or new officers together and talk these through when you don't have the pressure of having to plan a whole program year. It can be a time of collegiality and fellowship because you're on the same team, you're pulling in the same direction.
I think that's a really good point. The fellowship and the collegiality. And, Philip, share your comment about management versus leadership. I wrote it down if you don't have it.
I will. And this is not original with me. When talking about organizations, leadership is something that creates energy. Management is something that just apportions it. So if you're in a big corporate situation and you have to figure out who's going to do what job, you need management. But if you're in a small organization where you need more leadership energy, what you need is leadership. I could give you some examples of that from private industry if you want, but let's not dwell on it.
I think that's so true. I think it's so true. And there are ways, if you've got your policies written down, then you can hold people accountable. And there's no confusion.
Well, I doubt it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
A written policy does not hold anybody accountable. I think what would works is if people are accountable to their own truth to the organization's fundamental principles, they'll do it. They'll hold themselves accountable. A document is not going to hold them accountable. Even the board's not going to hold them accountable. Although I'm not speaking against the operating procedures nor against the to-do lists or anything like that. It's just that it doesn't work. to hold people accountable that way.
Well, I think if you've explained the expectations, as Sue said, whether
Right.
it was in a nice collegial environment, so that they understand what is expected of them, and then it makes it a lot easier to have a conversation with them.
That's a good thing. I just don't think it holds them accountable, that's all.
Hmm, okay. Well, I know chapters, I think, have struggled this year, first of all, to find people that want to serve. I think this is pretty much an overall concern. Sue, I don't know, have you encountered this? I know that it's been difficult. Yeah.
Yes, we're still getting our water wings. I hate to keep going back to COVID, but it just set everybody back on our heels for so many different reasons. And it took a huge toll in our church programs, our church membership. And I'm beginning to see a lot of hope in a number of situations, but people had to realign their own ways of looking at things, how they spend their time. We found out how much we need to be with other people, and we relied, I think, too much on technology. And I think we've forgotten that while we have high tech, there's nothing in the world that can replace high touch. That's reaching out and looking at people in the eye, um, talking to them across a table. And I think we're beginning to rediscover the joy of fellowship and camaraderie and working together.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And there are going to be times when not everybody's going to agree with each other, but you respectfully disagree. That's the difference. And yeah, it's kind of weird after you've been on Zoom for a couple of years to suddenly be sitting around a table. But there's also such an excitement. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to see people. Kristen.
I think it's also helpful within this conversation of talking about policies, you know, speaking about this time post-COVID and people's own time and willingness to volunteer and to come forth and try to fit volunteer kinds of roles into their lives. I think it's a good time for chapters to look at their policies about programming and to confront the issue of, in the past, we used to do X number of programs. Maybe we need to think about doing a few less, or maybe we need to think about doing something that brings us together more in a fellowship way than having to program, something with an educational focus or a performance focus all the time. But within a chapter's policy, you might be able to redefine it and a calendar that might better serve your chapter.
That's such a good point because I've said it, less is more. Don't put more on your shoulders than you can actually handle. And some chapters just feel obligated because they've always done it that way. And frustration occurs. People get mad because they can't fulfill what they said they would do. And it's tough. It's tough. I think, I remember when I was president of an association that was chapter structured. Well, it was a different environment. It was 20 years ago. We were communicating by fax, but we'll just leave it at that. But we sat and we talked and we figured things out. And I knew who my wingman was. I had a wonderful president. I was president-elect. When I became president, my president-elect was wonderful. I was the person that was the big picture, and she was the one would say, "No, wait a second, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get there?" And it made all the difference in the world. So sometimes complimenting each other, you may not have the same skill set, but when you put it all together, it works. And I think also what's happened is, and I agree with you, Sue, I hate to keep using the word post-COVID, but serving in a leadership position, which at one point would have been such an honor and a thrill, suddenly, post-COVID, you have less time and you have different priorities. And your family may take priority. Suddenly, leadership is not up here and family's up there, or having to look for another job to be able to support your family. So it's changed. We're living in a new dynamic, I think. I think so.
Could I interject something? I think it's important to figure out how a chapter, and maybe even how the whole guild, delivers value to its members. So the membership dues just went up again, and so for roughly $100 a year, what's the value? Well, you get the magazine, pretty expensive magazine, if that's all you get, right? And you get programs, and you question that when only 20% of the membership shows up. And we've had some good programs. And one of the things that I've done is to notice that only 20% of the membership shows up. So I'm going to write up what happened. And I hope people read it. We distributed that the 3 ways. We distributed it in the newsletter, Facebook, and in hard copy. Maybe it'll work sooner or later. And we've had some good social events. For instance, our dean in the past, when she was a student, she was a student of John Langley in France. And as you know, he was blind from birth. And she was also his guide for a couple of years. She guided him on ocean liners and on airplanes and everything else. And get this, one time she kept him from falling off the edge of the stage. Now, where else would you get that kind of stuff except person to person? They're in an intimate program. And
That's when we've got your backs. No pun intended.
Absolutely. We've had a couple garden parties here at my house for members. And Susan has had a couple with her instruments up there in the North Country. One of the problems we've had, I don't know whether the other chapters do too, we're really spread out. Our chapter covers the entire state of New Hampshire, and it's a 4-hour drive from the south border up to Canada, and add another hour to that if you're going to go crosswise through the mountains. So it's hard for people to get together. And we've talked about things like, let's have wine and cheese via Zoom. Well, I don't know if that would work. Maybe it would. So we are continuing to try that. The write-up that I sent you, Elizabeth, the congregation put on a really nice reception for the chapter members and for the performer at St. Paul's in Concord. And that was a nice social event. And we've actually discovered that when we involve the congregation in a program, we get better response from the congregation than we do from the chapter members. I don't know what to do about that. I guess it's a good thing.
I think, as Sue said, people want to see each other face to face and talk. And I think, social events are just as important as organ crawls and workshops and recitals. Now, some people may disagree with me, but there's something that it's a personal connection that you're not going to get on a Zoom. Nothing wrong with Zoom. And I know some chapters are doing happy hours and coffee hours and, occasionally doing that just to keep, particularly for people that are spread out, because yours is not the only chapter, but you do cover a full state, and that is challenging. That is very challenging.
Well,
And
we
Memphis,
could do
is
more of that.
Memphis spread out, Kristen?
No, we're fortunate to be within, pretty much a 20-mile radius, but we do have some people who drive in about an hour away who are still affiliated with our chapter. They're in Jackson, Tennessee. But Phil, one thing that you said that was really important is that as secretary, you're putting together a newsletter, and that may or may not be in your chapter's policies or in your job description, but it's something that you, a duty that you're fulfilling as part of your role. And that's, I think, just kind of going back to this idea of policy and how that helps your chapter function successfully. It's just this delineation of duties under each person's job title.
Well, maybe the result is the same, but I don't think it's a written document that enables people to do that. I think it's a fundamental commitment to want to add value to the membership. And I started writing up articles on our programs without it being in the policies and without being asked, because I thought it was the thing to do. And I think it's been well received, at least by a few. So if you could internally follow your muse, I think that that's going to be more effective than reading a document.
Does anybody, we've got 40 participants. Does anybody want to comment? I can certainly unmute you if you'd like to share something. Post it in the chat box. This is an open conversation. And I know some of you I can see who have registered have had to deal with some tough things. And maybe it'd be great for your peers to kind of hear how you solved it. Cheryl Sebo. Okay, let me find you. And I will unmute you. All right, where are you? I know you're there. Can you unmute yourself? I think you might be able to. Well, post, let me just see. Okay,
Can
let's
you
look at
use
the
the chat
Q&A.
room? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, chat's disabled. Oh, comments can be keyed into the Q&A. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I am sorry about that. All right, I don't know why I'm not seeing our dear Cheryl Sebo here. I will keep looking. Cheryl, do you want to comment in the Q&A? And oh, yeah, there you are. Okay, I'm so sorry. You are unmuted now.
My thought is that both are right, that I think it is important that we have procedures written out for the different job descriptions. But since Philip has made newsletters a very important part of that chapter for the whole state, and it is vital to keep people together, the next person coming along in that position may not be good at that. But if they know that it's an expectation, you can find someone that's their passion and that they are good at just delegate to another person, because the next secretary may not want to do that. And that's how things fall by the wayside. And those things are forgotten. Whereas if you put it in writing that this is something that is hoped for and expected, then the chapter will find a way.
Thank you. I agree with you. I agree with you. Anyone else want to comment?
You know, I think one thing we need to, sorry.
Okay. A question from Bob. Can the AGO send our board a hard copy of the board book? We in Northeast Minnesota need to shake out a few wrinkles. Thanks. Well, you know what? It's online and you can download it in a PDF. And what I'm going to do right now, if I may, is I'm going to share my screen and show you where it is. My computer's running on empty. There we go. All right. Hopefully you can see this. This is the board team handbook. This is actually chapter 6, which talks about the board's job is to set policy. Once you've logged in to the website, there's a document center. You can see it up on the top left-hand corner, and you can go in there and you can download this, save it on your computer. We don't have printed copies of this. But you certainly could print it out or at least share it with your members, because as Sue said, there are so many wonderful practical things in this book. So you can find it online. And I'm just gonna say, fingers crossed. I really hope that most of you by now have figured out how to set your credentials so that you are able to access our website and update your profile. If you are still having difficulty, please do let us know. We're here to help. Okay, we've got some more questions here. I'm going to answer them. Many organists are not good at reading and understanding the legalese in chapter documents. We've had deans who did not understand that they were not allowed to rule by fit. I think deans need to be able to build and rule by consensus rather than by decree. So true. So true. Is there a new drive available so that we can archive our policies there? We don't have a place to store documents at this point. And one board member won't use Google Drive. Well, you've led Ken, who is Dean of the Western Massachusetts chapter, into something very exciting that I'd like to share with you. Is we are creating an online community platform called Connect. And I'm going to give a sneak peek of it towards the end of March. We'll have a very brief, might have a town hall or webinar, but literally it is where communities of interest are formed. So each chapter can have their own community. You can store your documents there. You might have a chapter just of a community of deans. You might have a community just of newsletter editors. I mean, the communities are endless, but it's a place where you can upload documents, you can share links to things, you can have discussions. And so I'm very excited about this. And we are very, very, very much, we didn't want to launch it now. We're going into Lent, and I know people are going to have a lot on their hands. Ken also said, I'm interested in how to balance the list of duties for each officer so that it's helpful but not overwhelming. The sample operating procedures seem too detailed for our chapter. Now, Kristen, I know David Oots shared some wonderful bullet points about how the Memphis chapter took those responsibilities and put them into very simple bullet points and put it into a booklet so that it wasn't overwhelming, so that people understood what they needed to do without having to go through 3 pages of responsibilities. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I think that is, kind of up to each chapter to figure out how to detail your list of duties. What you think is realistic for your chapter. If you're a chapter with 125 members, you might be able to establish committees that could assist different officers. If you're a chapter of 25, you might have to say, well, what can we realistically do in these jobs, and what do we really need to have done? And so I think each chapter can tailor these things to themselves.
I have a comment here from Daniel. As development chair, we've raised money for our scholarships in a concert in October 24. Passionate board members were all on board with forming a scholarship committee to determine how to disperse the $10,000+ generous with generosity. There have been 2 health crises in the last lives of key people who wanted to serve. With all the pastoral compassion I have been able to give these people, continue to ghost me and the board. Are we able to have the dean allow me to appoint a scholarship committee? Yes, absolutely. The board can appoint a scholarship committee. Does that take executive approval? Well, I would say that the board would probably want to talk about it and agree to it so that everybody's on board with it, rather than having one person just making all of the policies. And Sue said something earlier, which we haven't talked about a lot, but there's absolutely nothing wrong in having co-deans or co-subdeans. Um, divide the responsibilities. Absolutely. And one of my pet peeves is if you have, and some chapters have lots of members at large, but I'm not so sure those members of large have been given duties and responsibilities. And if you want them to be engaged and move up your leadership pipeline and make them feel more valued, you have to say, okay, I need help with this. Would you chair this committee? And I see Sue nodding.
So we had a good experience here. You want to hear a good experience?
Sure.
So our dean introduced us to the concept of Orgle Kids. And we bought one for $10,000. And one of the people that was on the executive committee as a member at large said, I'll do that. I'll take it around and I'll demonstrate it. And he's now on the board, and that's what he's doing. He's doing a good job. So he picked it up because he was interested in it.
Oh, Sue and I love to hear that. That's music to our ears, no pun intended. Sue, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that I've been trying to fill in comments, on the question and answer board as you were talking.
Thank you.
And a lot of people have an opinion that because it's in a book form, that it's too top heavy and too serious for their chapters. And I would just like to say that it is not that way. And don't be afraid if there are 30 pages of something. There is so much wisdom in this board team handbook. I use it in other areas of my life because it is so down to earth and so well written. And it really helps in all of the work that you do in your church life and other organizations, because we have to keep reminding ourselves of different communication styles and different ways to work with any number of people. And I, I, it's so beautifully organized. It's like the best vitamin pill you could ever want, and it makes you're working with people healthy.
Oh, so we've got a question here. What did Philip buy for $10,000? Some kind of kit. Oh, well, or Orgle Kids kits, are these little small little organs. And we've got a whole section on STEAM, adding arts to STEM programs up on our website. If your chapter has the money, I know the Nashville chapter has done a wonderful job with their pedals, pipes, and pizza outside of the central city district and bringing the Orgle Kids kit that they bought. So it enhances that pedals, pipes, and pizza. And if you haven't, we have a video somewhere, I think, of these kids putting it together. Kristen?
Well, and the Nashville chapter is a great one, just kind of displaying this concept. They bought one of these kits and they have put together a policy about the use of the kit and who is able to use it and how it's able to be used and that sort of thing. And that just provides great clarity for the chapter. It allows the committee, who's kind of in charge of the thing, to evaluate any sort of question that comes up about it. And it keeps it, organized in terms of how they deal with using the kit and who uses it and how they use it. So their policies really just assist in that. And of course, whoever is using or who is in charge of that committee right now will not be doing that in perpetuity. And so whoever comes after them already has this set of guidelines on how to manage it.
Sue, I know in the Atlanta chapter first got its Orgle kit, you all had to sit down and think, okay, now how are we going to manage this? Who's going to do what? How do we because it's you just had to come up with some policies in order to.
Well, we're still working on that because we have 15 counties in greater Atlanta, metropolitan Atlanta, and a lot of home school groups. And we're trying to set up a clean and neat system for scheduling groups to take the Oracle kids out. We've added a lot of science exhibits and activities to go along with it. But we've had to deal with the organizational and business end of it because Atlanta is a large metropolitan community. So we're again having to develop policies just like what we're talking about tonight.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking down to see if there are any more questions or comments.
So follow up on implement
Yes.
Oracle kids. We've had one session that contained both adults and kids, and then John has done one in a school too. And his plan is to have one representative in each county. That would be about 10, and be able to roll out the demonstration in each county. As people learn, they'll get more enthusiastic about it. I made the suggestion, why don't you write a lesson plan so that when somebody is presenting it, they cover the fact that a stop pipe speaks an octave lower than an open pipe. Because many of these people are taking physics and they want to know that stuff. Another comment I made is, why don't you get something sanitary that will allow them to blow the pipe? So,
They
we're
can do
learning
that
as,
just by putting their hand between their mouth and the end of the pipe.
we thought of maybe plastic tubing or something like that. So we're learning as we go there, and hopefully we'll get it written down so that it's easier to share with other facilitators.
I love Charlene Higby's comment. I totally agree with various comments that each chapter should be realistic as to what is possible and find a balance in programming and participation expectations. Well said, Charlene. It's each chapter is different. And if you can collaborate, I think that's a wonderful thing as well. Lessens the responsibilities. But be realistic about what you can handle. Well, I think we've had a really good discussion tonight. Any last words of wisdom, Sue?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have one other comment.
Okay.
Don't make the list of duties too long. You'll scare people away. Here's an example. So I'm the chapter auditor, so I know about this stuff, and we've got a separate treasurer. How would anybody know who they're responsible to in the government for the administration of nonprofits? In New Hampshire, it's the New Hampshire Attorney General's office, and they have separate rules for churches and nonprofit organizations, and we have to pay them taxes every year. So we better write it down, because that's something that would fall in the cracks, and then we have a fine.
Definitely. And every state is different, isn't it? Sue?
Well, I suppose.
I wanted to quickly say James Thomashower, our executive director, has put in the chat board the link for all of the Oracle kids. There are all kinds of class plans and experiments and things that you can avail yourselves of. So look in the chat board for that wonderful link for Oracle kids if you have questions. And I do hope that this conversation has opened some people's eyes and ears that there is help and it doesn't weigh you down, it lifts you up.
Love that. Love that. Kristen, any final thoughts, observations?
No, I'm just so pleased that we could all be here. I'm so pleased that people signed up for this. And I do hope that, yeah, that these are things that you will enjoy wrestling with together as a chapter to figure out what policies are going to make our chapter run more smoothly and capably.
So Kristen, I noticed that you have a little 1 or 2 rank organetto in your living room. So there's no question about your commitment to this kind of stuff.
Well, this is a little 3-rank portative built by Martin Ott, and I'm actually still at my office at the church, but I feel quite lucky to have it here and in my office.
I've got a 2 manual plus pedal electronic, And I know that's not as good as a 3 manual pipe organ, but that's what I practice on.
Well, thank you, James, for putting the links in the chat. We will put these in a handout. I might even go step by step and show you with arrows and screenshots of where you can find our documents in our document center. But I want to thank Sue and Philip and Kristen for being here tonight, and thank all of you who I know on a Monday night might have much more exciting things to do. So you've given up your time, and we appreciate it, and we so value what you are doing for the AGO. We can never say thank you enough. So I want to thank everyone that has registered tonight. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our next webinar. We have one coming up on Monday, March 24th. And this sounds really interesting to me. It's called the Conductor's Coach webinar. So it introduces a Conductor's Coach, which is a new app designed to help train conductors. And it'll demonstrate a tool that will allow aspiring choral conductors to practice and refine their technique. It features nearly 70 tutorials with video demonstrations. Wow, this sounds incredible. So that is, I think it's already up on the website that you can register, but it is Monday, March 24th, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and or 4 p.m. Pacific Time. So we hope to see you there. And I'm just going to thank you again. Everybody stay well, be well, and Sue?
I've just noticed that some people said the chat board was closed and all the information that we shared is really in the question and answer area. And I wanted to
Yes.
remind people that this program was recorded, so you can go back and check
Absolutely.
the question and answer area and get the specific details of some of the things that were mentioned in the links.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll have the chats download. I don't know why they're disabled. I share this account with another colleague in the office. I have a feeling things may change a little bit based on preferences. But anyway, thank you all. Everybody be safe, be well, and we will see you soon.